The virus is also affecting how at least one airline is doing business. Cathay Pacific is cutting back flights and asking all of its workers to take unpaid leave. It was already reeling from anti-government protests. Now the employees are worried about layoffs. Here's Christy Lustout from Hong Kong.
Cathay Pacific would like to take you on a tour of Asia.
Frequent flyers of Cathay Pacific may love or loathe the classic ads from decades ago, promoting award-winning service and gorgeous flight attendants from, and I quote, 10 Asian lands. Today, this Hong Kong-born flight attendant has an expression you cannot see. She wears a mask during the outbreak and to protect her identity as she speaks frankly about keeping her job using the pseudonym Emily.
Worrying that there might be redundancy or even, redundancy is the worst.
Emily has been a Cathay cabin crew member for 7 years. She enjoys her job, but fears for the future. Cathay usually flies about 34 million passengers every year, serving over 200 cities around the world from its hub at Hong Kong International Airport.
The outbreak has hammered Cathay Pacific and the global airline industry as passengers cancel their travel plans and governments impose travel restrictions against recent visitors to mainland China. Analysts say the industry could get hit harder than SARS, which cost global airlines $7 billion.
The collapse in passenger numbers has forced Cathay to slash flights worldwide by 30% and flights to mainland China by a whopping 90%. Cathay initially took a neutral stance as the protests began. Then Chinese state media slammed the airline's workers for taking part in what it called illegal demonstrations. Beijing banned any Cathay staff involved in the protests from flying into China. Cathay's former CEO and chief commercial officer resigned, and a culture of fear took hold as the airline cracked down on staff involved in the demonstrations. Workers tell CNN many were fired. Cathay says dismissals were all made within regulations. Yet despite all the turmoil, analysts say the airline's long-term prospects are positive.
They are the major airline in one of the great hubs of the world. So while they'll take a battering, they will bounce back. In SARS, they laid off staff when they had a 40% cut in capacity over about an 8-week period. Then in 2009, when the global financial crisis hit, again, they asked 17,000 staff to take 4 weeks unpaid leave. So it's not unusual for Cathay.
But as the current outbreak drags on, businesses are struggling to deal with the financial turbulence caused by the coronavirus. Cathay is asking its 27,000 employees to take 3 weeks off without pay, without mention of layoffs. In a statement, the airline says, in view of the novel coronavirus outbreak and also significant drop in market demand, we announced massive capacity cuts. Preserving cash is the key to protecting our business. Emily says she will take the offer, fearing she could be let go.
I'm afraid if I don't participate or if not enough people participating in it, there might be more measures to be put in place in order to use the management terms, preserving cash.
Back in the day, Cathay Pacific promised an experience for its passengers to
arrive in better shape.
It's a message the iconic airline needs now more than ever as Hong Kong struggles with uncertainty. Christy Lustout, CNN, Hong Kong.
The number of coronavirus cases has sharply risen following changes in the way it's diagnosed. The World Health Organization is seeking clarity from China after 15,000 more infections were recorded on Wednesday. 254 more deaths have been confirmed. That's more than double the previous daily record. Almost all of them are in Hubei province. Almost 60,000 people in China are now known to be infected, and the number of those killed stands at more than 1,300. Also, officials in Vietnam have placed a town of 10,000 people under quarantine following 5 cases of virus infection there. Vietnam declared a public health emergency over the epidemic at the beginning of this month. And in Japan, a cruise ship, the Diamond Princess, remains quarantined in Yokohama after an outbreak of the virus on board. It's now thought 218 passengers and crew members are among those infected. Our correspondent, Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, is in the port.
So the number of infections on board the Diamond Princess behind me here in Yokohama has again jumped today. 44 new cases confirmed today. That followed 39 cases yesterday. And that brings the total number of infections from the ship to 218. And that means, as we know now, that this is now the single biggest outbreak of the COVID-19 virus anywhere outside mainland China. The Japanese government has made a small concession to the criticism that has been building of the way that it's handling this outbreak. They've said that very elderly people over the age of 80 will be allowed to disembark if they have underlying health conditions or if they are in one of those inside cabins that don't have any outside windows or balconies. So expect to see that start happening maybe tonight or on Friday. But there are many questions that remain. First of all, obviously, are infections still taking place? Is the virus still circulating around the ship? No one really knows. And the other big question is, why still has the Japanese government not managed to test all of the passengers and crew on board?
A ninth person has tested positive for coronavirus in the UK. The woman flew into London from China and was tested after developing symptoms. The man at the centre of the main outbreak in the UK, Steve Walsh, a businessman from East Sussex, has now been discharged from hospital after being given the all clear. He'd caught the virus on a business trip to Singapore. The World Health Organization says the number of new infections in China is stabilising, but it's too early to say if the epidemic is past its...
The latest case means there are 9 in the UK, while more than 1,700 people have tested negative here. There are more than 44,500 confirmed cases in China and around 1,100 deaths.
At the moment, it's still entirely possible that we may be in a position where the Chinese authorities manage to get on top of this infection. The biggest risk to us is actually if the efforts in mainland China don't succeed in maintaining the infection and restricting it to China, and if many other countries then have widespread outbreaks of infection.
Well, China's coronavirus continues to spread. Authorities are saying the outbreak could peak in 10 days. There have now been 132 deaths, close to 6,000 cases, and 16 countries outside China have confirmed cases. As you can see from this graph, the number of cases has spiked over the past week, and the city of Wuhan continues to be at the centre of the outbreak. The authorities are telling residents not to travel anywhere. And this is the situation in which some of those residents are living. Completely deserted streets, as you can see, because people are not only being told not to leave the city, they're being told not to leave their homes. Also in Wuhan, this has been happening. 2 new hospitals are being built, especially for coronavirus patients. The first has over 1,000 beds, and we're told it will be finished within a week. Well, you can also see conditions inside one of the existing hospitals in Wuhan. Dozens of patients have to queue for checks. New patients are arriving all the time, and you can see everyone is wearing face masks, some medical staff wearing full body suits as well. And then this is in Hong Kong, where people have been queuing for a huge amount of time to buy face masks because there's a citywide shortage of them. Well, as we have done every day since this crisis began, the Chinese authorities have been briefing us.
We are now in a critical period of the prevention of this epidemic. We need to control the potential source of the virus.
Well, the BBC's Stephen McDonnell has just been to Hubei province to report. He's back in Beijing, where he's based, and this is his latest update.
Everybody who's been in Hubei province is expected to stay away from their workplace for 2 weeks, and so that's what I'm doing, as others are. It's just that the authorities are taking more and more strict precautions when you go into buildings. I mean, I'm back in Beijing now. You go into buildings, you're having your temperature checked, whether it be an office building or a building where people live with flats. The streets are very quiet in the Chinese capital. I mean, it's normally kind of quiet for the Spring Festival, but it's very quiet. People are not walking around. They don't want to leave their homes if they don't have to for risk of being infected. There's an interesting comparison with SARS. So people on social media are plotting the trajectory of this coronavirus with the SARS outbreak in 2002. Now, it seems that this is a much more infectious virus.